The mining outpost sat at the edge of a silent valley. The sky was dark and wide, filled with stars that shimmered like scattered jewels. Ethan, a human engineer, worked alone in the control shack. His hands were tired and covered in dust from long hours repairing machines. The hum of the generators was the only sound that kept him company. He liked the quiet, but sometimes the silence felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. That night, something strange happened. His radio console began to flicker with static. At first he thought it was a storm, but the sky was clear. The static repeated in steady bursts, almost like a heartbeat. Ethan frowned. He leaned closer and adjusted the controls. The signal shifted, then formed a rhythm that was not random. It sounded like voices, but not human voices. He replayed it again and again. The more he listened, the more certain he became. Someone was calling out. It was not simple noise. It was language. A chill moved down his spine. He should have ignored it. He should have reported it to the outpost officials. But curiosity gripped him tighter than fear. Against his better judgment, he packed a small bag with tools, a light, and a scanner. Then he left the outpost and followed the signal into the mountains. The path was rough and broken. Rocks shifted under his boots. Cold wind whistled through narrow cliffs, carrying the echo of the strange calls. He climbed higher and higher, until the valley floor looked like a shadow far below. The signal grew stronger. His scanner pulsed with every beat, pulling him forward as if guiding his steps. Hours passed before he reached a wide clearing hidden deep between ridges. The ground trembled faintly beneath him. The air shimmered as if alive with heat. Ethan stopped. His breath caught in his throat. He had found the source. There before him stood a herd of dragons. They were unlike any tale he had heard on Earth. Their bodies were massive, their scales shining with colors that shifted like liquid fire. Wings stretched wide like sails, folding and unfolding with restless motion. Their eyes glowed like molten gold. Dozens of them stood together, forming a circle around the clearing. They were not illusions. They were alive, breathing, and real. Ethan froze in place. His heart pounded against his chest. Every part of his mind screamed for him to run. He was only a man. These were creatures of legend, creatures that could burn him to ash with a single breath. Yet they did not attack. They watched him with steady eyes. The largest of them, a dragon older than the rest, stepped forward. Its scales were cracked and scarred, glowing faintly in the dim light. The dragon lowered its head until its golden eyes were level with Ethan. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rough, like stone grinding against stone. But to Ethan's shock, the words were in broken human tongue. "Human! Help us!" The words struck Ethan harder than the cold air around him. His mouth went dry. He had imagined many things during his lonely shifts at the outpost, but never this. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then forced himself to whisper. "Help you? Me? Why?" The old dragon shifted its wings. Behind it, smaller dragons stirred uneasily. Some growled. Some bowed their heads. The elder continued to speak, each word slow and heavy. "Our world is dying. The valley is poisoned. We cannot touch what is killing us. You can. Only you." Ethan shook his head. The request was impossible. He was just an engineer. He repaired engines, not worlds. He looked at the herd, at the hatchlings pressed against their mothers, at the scarred earth around the valley that pulsed with a sickly glow. He saw their pain. He felt their desperation. Every dragon's eyes were fixed on him. They were powerful, but in that moment they looked fragile. They looked afraid. Ethan's heart pounded with fear, but also with something else. Wonder. A part of him that had long slept was waking. For years he had believed he was small, unimportant, just another man forgotten by time. But here, standing before legends of fire and scale, he was not forgotten. He was needed. He took a slow breath. His voice trembled, but he forced himself to speak. "What do you want me to do?" The elder dragon's gaze softened. For a brief moment, The weight of its age and sorrow flickered in its eyes. "Follow us. See. Then decide." The ground rumbled as the herd shifted. The dragons spread their wings, casting shadows over the clearing. The young silver-scaled dragon nearest to Ethan lowered herself to the ground, bowing as if offering him her back. Ethan's chest tightened. He understood the choice before him. If he climbed onto her, there would be no turning back. His life would change forever. He looked at the herd once more. The wind carried their breath, hot and sharp, filling the air with the scent of smoke and earth. Their eyes glowed with hope, fear, and something deeper, something that stirred his heart. Slowly, he stepped forward. His hand touched the silver scales, warm and alive under his palm. He felt the power beneath them, the strength of a creature that could crush him in an instant. Yet the dragon did not move. She waited for him. She trusted him. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with steady resolve. "All right. Show me." The herd roared together, a sound that shook the mountains. The night sky lit up as wings rose like storm clouds. Ethan climbed onto the silver dragon's back, his hands gripping her scales. With a single leap, she launched into the sky. The wind tore against his face, sharp and cold, yet his heart burned with fire. Below him, the herd followed, a river of wings and flame. For the first time in his life, Ethan was not alone. For the first time, he felt the call of destiny. And it began with a single plea. A herd of dragons had asked a human for help. They could never imagine what would happen next. The silver dragon carried Ethan high above the mountains. The night stretched wide, the stars shining brighter than he had ever seen. The wind tore at his clothes, but his heart pounded louder than the rush of air. He clung to the scales beneath him, half in terror and half in awe. Below, the herd followed in graceful formation. Their wings moved like waves, their roars echoing across the valley. It was not a scene from a dream. It was real, and Ethan was part of it. At last, the dragons descended. The silver one landed in a broad valley hidden between jagged cliffs. The herd circled down after her, shaking the ground with the weight of their landing. Ethan slid down carefully, his boots touching the earth. What he saw froze him where he stood. The valley was vast, but it was dying. Black scars cut across the ground. Rivers that should have flowed bright were thick and dark. Trees stood hollow, their branches brittle like bones. A bitter smell filled the air, sharp and sour, burning his throat with every breath. The silver dragon lowered her head beside him. Her golden eyes shimmered with sadness. Ethan felt a strange weight in his chest. He walked further into the valley. He saw nests made of stone and crystal, where hatchlings lay weak and shivering. Some were too thin. Their scales had lost their shine. They whimpered softly, their cries breaking the silence. Dragons, proud and mighty, bent low to shield their young. Mothers and fathers folded their wings around them, but it did little good. The sickness of the land was stronger than their strength. Ethan turned to the elder dragon, who had followed him. The giant's scales flickered faintly, as if even its fire was fading. "What happened here?" Ethan asked, his voice heavy. The elder's voice rumbled through the valley. "Long ago, the earth gave us life. It gave us fire and strength. But beneath it, machines sleep. Not ours. Left behind by a war older than memory. They bleed poison. We cannot touch them. They burn us. They break our minds. But you are human. The poison does not kill your kind. You can reach where we cannot." Ethan's chest tightened. He stared at the scarred land. The machines the dragon spoke of were buried here, hidden under stone and soil, yet powerful enough to corrupt an entire valley. "I'm no hero," Ethan whispered. "I'm just an engineer." The elder lowered its great head closer, until Ethan could see every scar carved into its scales. "Even the smallest flame can guide the lost," the dragon said softly. Ethan turned away, his thoughts in turmoil. He walked past the nests again. A hatchling coughed weakly, its tiny body trembling. Ethan knelt down, his hand hovering over the fragile creature. The dragonling opened its eyes, glowing faintly like dying embers. It reached out its small claw, brushing against his hand. The touch was light, but it struck deep into his heart. He looked at the herd around him. Dozens of dragons stood in silence, their eyes filled with a desperate kind of hope. These were beings of fire and power, yet they looked at him as if he were their last chance. His mind raced. He thought of his outpost, of the life he had before this night. It had been empty, filled only with work and silence. Now, standing here, he was no longer empty. He was needed. The silver dragon stepped closer, her scales gleaming faintly under the starlight. She studied him with calm, patient eyes. He felt the warmth of her presence, strong but gentle, as if she was silently telling him that he was not alone. Ethan took a long breath. "Show me where the machines are," he said at last. His voice was steady now, though his heart raced. "I'll try. I can't promise I'll succeed, but I'll try." The herd stirred. Wings shifted. Low rumbles echoed through the valley, not of anger, but of hope rising like fire. The elder dragon raised its head high, and the sound of its roar shook the night sky. The other dragons answered, their voices filling the valley with thunder. Ethan stood in the middle of them all, his figure small but unbroken. He felt the weight of their trust pressing on him, heavy yet powerful. For the first time, the broken valley did not feel silent. It felt alive with a promise. Ethan had given them his word. He would try. And with that, the fate of the herd, and perhaps the fate of more than he could imagine, rested in human hands. The next morning, the valley was quiet. The dragons rested in silence, their great bodies curled around nests and stones. Smoke drifted faintly from their nostrils, rising into the pale sky. Ethan stood near the silver dragon, who watched him closely with steady golden eyes. He had not slept. His mind was heavy with questions, but one truth remained clear. If he was to help them, he would need to see the machines with his own eyes. The elder dragon approached. Its scales glowed weakly, like fading embers. Its voice rumbled low. "Beneath the cliffs," it said, "there is a place we cannot enter. That is where the poison comes from." Ethan gripped the strap of his bag. His tools rattled inside, small against the weight of the task ahead. He nodded once, his jaw tight. "Take me there," he answered. The herd stirred as he walked with the elder toward the cliffs. Some dragons lowered their heads as he passed. Others looked doubtful, their eyes sharp and mistrusting. To them, he was still a fragile human, weak compared to their strength. Yet Ethan did not look away. He knew trust had to be earned, not asked for. At the mouth of the cliffs, the air grew heavy. A faint hum vibrated through the stone, low and unnatural. The silver dragon followed him closely, her wings folded tight against her body. She gave a quiet growl, almost protective. Ethan placed his hand on the rock wall. It was warm, too warm for stone. His scanner buzzed sharply. Strange signals echoed through the device, like whispers from deep inside the earth. "This is it," he murmured. With a deep breath, he stepped into the passage. The silver dragon tried to follow, but the elder shook its massive head. "No further," the elder warned. "This place kills us. Only the human may pass." The silver dragon's tail lashed with frustration, but she obeyed, her eyes fixed on Ethan as he disappeared into the dark. The passage twisted downward like the throat of a beast. The air grew thick, bitter with the stench of metal and smoke. Ethan's torch lit the walls, revealing strange markings carved into the stone. They pulsed faintly, glowing as if alive. His footsteps echoed. Each step felt heavier, as if the air itself resisted him. Then, without warning, the silence broke. A sharp clang rang out. From the shadows, something moved. Metal scraped against stone. Ethan swung his torch and froze. A drone crawled from the wall, its body black and insect-like, eyes glowing red. Its limbs unfolded with sharp blades that gleamed in the dim light. The hum of the valley was louder now, pulsing through the machine as it locked onto him. Fear struck his chest like a hammer. He backed away, fumbling for his tool kit. The drone lunged. Before it could strike, a roar thundered through the passage. A blur of silver burst into the tunnel. Liara, the silver dragon, forced herself past the entrance, her scales hissing as they burned against the poisoned stone. She struck the drone with her claws, shattering its limbs, but not before one blade tore across her side. Sparks and blood sprayed in the same breath. "Liara!" Ethan shouted, his voice breaking. The drone sparked violently, dragging itself back to attack again. Ethan dropped to his knees beside his bag, pulling out a tool he had once used to cut steel. His hands shook, but his mind was clear. He rushed forward, slamming the cutter against the drone's core. Sparks exploded. The machine shrieked in static before collapsing into silence. Breathing hard, Ethan dropped the tool and turned to the dragon. Liara's silver scales were cracked where the blade had struck her. Blood ran down her side, glowing faintly in the torchlight. Her eyes, though, were still sharp and focused on him. Without thinking, Ethan tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against the wound. His hands moved quickly, wrapping the cloth tight. The heat of her body burned his skin, but he did not stop. "Hold still," he said, his voice steady despite the fear inside him. "I've got you." For a moment, Liara did not move. Then, slowly, she lowered her head beside him. A low sound rumbled in her throat, not of pain, but of trust. Ethan's heart pounded. In that moment, something changed. He was not just a human who wandered into their valley. He was someone willing to stand with them, even in the jaws of death. He looked deeper into the passage. At the end of the tunnel, faint light pulsed from a great chamber, like the heartbeat of something alive. The hum was louder, stronger, calling to him. He knew the real test still waited ahead. But as he glanced at Liara, who had risked her life to protect him, Ethan felt his fear shift into resolve. He was no longer walking into the dark alone. The chamber at the end of the tunnel glowed with a faint, pulsing light. Ethan stood at the entrance, his breath shallow, his heart heavy with fear and wonder. The air was hot and sharp, filled with the scent of smoke and metal. Liara limped beside him, her wound wrapped in the cloth he had tied. She leaned on the wall, her body trembling, yet her golden eyes stayed fixed on him. She would not leave his side. Ethan raised his torch. The light revealed the chamber in full. It was vast, carved into the heart of the mountain. Machines covered the walls like veins of iron. Strange symbols pulsed across their surfaces, glowing red and white. At the center stood a massive core, round and alive with light, beating like the heart of some great beast. Each pulse sent vibrations through the floor, rattling his bones. He stepped closer. His scanner beeped wildly, unable to measure the energy. He had never seen technology like this. It was old, ancient, yet still alive, waiting, watching. Liara gave a low growl. Ethan turned his head and saw more drones sleeping in the shadows, their bodies curled like insects in nests. At any moment, they could wake. He tightened his grip on his tool, but his attention was drawn back to the core. Something was happening. The core's light shifted as he approached. Its pulses quickened, its glow brightened. Symbols raced across the walls, faster and faster, as though reacting to him. Ethan stopped, frozen. The light grew so strong it blinded him for a moment. Then, a voice spoke. It was not a dragon's voice, nor a human's. It was something between, cold yet alive. "Human detected. Access confirmed." Ethan's mouth went dry. The chamber was speaking to him. The machines recognized him. But how? He had never been here before. Liara lowered her head, her eyes wide. She understood none of the words, yet she felt the shift in the air. The core's surface cracked open, revealing a swirling sphere of light within. It looked like liquid fire, suspended in air, moving in patterns too perfect to be natural. Ethan stepped back, fear clenching his chest, but the light reached toward him. Not with hands, not with force, but with energy, brushing against his skin like a whisper. Images filled his mind. Cities of glass. Towers of fire. Dragons chained in cages of steel. A war long forgotten. An enemy that had once ruled this world with cruelty and power. And at the heart of it all, machines built not to protect, but to imprison. Ethan staggered back, gasping. The vision vanished, but the echo of it burned in his mind. He looked at Liara, his voice shaking. These machines, they are not just weapons. They are a prison. Liara tilted her head, her golden eyes questioning. They are holding something back, Ethan said. Something dangerous. The chamber trembled as if answering him. The machines hummed louder, the ground shaking beneath his feet. The sleeping drones stirred, their red eyes flickering to life. Liara roared, her voice echoing through the stone. She stepped in front of Ethan despite her wound, her wings spreading wide in defiance. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He looked at the awakening machines, then at the glowing core. He understood now. If he shut down the system, the valley would be free of poison. The dragons could live again. But if he made one mistake, the prison would break, and whatever was sealed beneath could rise again. The choice burned inside him. The herd was waiting. Their trust weighed on him like chains. But he could not tell them this truth, not yet. If he failed, the danger would be greater than they imagined. The chamber shook harder. The drones stepped forward, blades raised. Ethan tightened his grip on his tool, but he knew he could not fight them all. His voice rose above the hum, steady and firm. We need to get out of here, he told Liara. She snarled, but obeyed, lowering her head. Ethan climbed onto her back, gripping her scales tightly. She spread her wings, pushing against the poisoned air, and with a single leap, she carried them out of the chamber. The machines roared behind them. The core pulsed like a heartbeat in fury. The valley above trembled as if something ancient had begun to stir. When they burst out into the night sky, the herd was waiting. The dragons lifted their heads, their eyes full of hope. Ethan looked at them, his heart torn. They wanted him to save them. They believed he could. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The machines were not just killing the valley. They were guarding something far worse. The herd gathered in silence as Ethan and Liara landed in the valley. Dust rose around them as the silver dragon lowered her head so he could climb down. Her wounds still glowed faintly, but she stood tall, her golden eyes fixed on him. Dozens of dragons surrounded them. Mothers shielded their hatchlings. The elder stepped forward, his wings folding against his massive frame. His voice rumbled like thunder rolling across mountains. What did you see, human? Ethan hesitated. His heart was heavy. He wanted to give them hope, but the truth was darker than their cries for help. He glanced at Liara, who watched him silently, her gaze steady and strong. I saw the machines, Ethan said. His voice carried across the valley. They are alive. They are poisoning the land. But that is not all. They are also holding something back. Something dangerous. The herd stirred uneasily. Deep growls rippled through their ranks. A young dragon hissed in fear. What danger? The elder pressed, his golden eyes narrowing. Ethan took a breath, his words slow and heavy. A prison. Whatever is sealed below was never meant to be free. If I destroy the machines, the valley may live again, but the enemy locked inside might rise. Shouts rose from the herd. Some dragons snarled in anger, their voices sharp like blades. Lies. He fears the task. He will leave us to die. Others lowered their heads, torn between doubt and hope. The air grew thick with tension, the herd divided. Liara stepped forward, her voice ringing clear, fierce with fire. He risked his life in the chamber. He fought the metal beasts. He saved me. He speaks truth. Do not call him a coward. The herd fell into silence at her words. Ethan's chest tightened. He had not expected her defense, but it gave him strength. Before the elder could answer, the ground shook violently. A deep rumble tore through the valley. Stones cracked. Dust fell from the cliffs. The air turned sharp with the smell of burning metal. From a dark fissure in the earth, shadows began to rise. They were not machines. They were not dragons. They were something twisted between both. Creatures of black smoke and molten bone crawled out of the cracks, their shapes shifting and wrong. Their eyes burned with red fire, and their voices hissed like whispers from the grave. The herd roared in alarm. Wings spread wide. Flames lit the night. The enemy below had awakened. The creatures lunged. One struck at the nearest dragon, its claws raking across bright scales, leaving trails of black fire. The dragon cried out in pain. Ethan's heart pounded. He stumbled back, his mind screaming to run, but he forced his legs to stay firm. His eyes darted to the broken machines. These things were their guardians. If they were rising, it meant the prison was weakening. The elder roared, unleashing fire that scorched the earth. Several creatures burned to ash, but more climbed out of the fissure, clawing their way into the valley. Liara bent low, her wings flaring wide. "Climb on!" she cried. Ethan jumped onto her back. She launched into the air, soaring above the chaos. From the sky, Ethan saw the battle below. Dragons fought with fire and claw, but the creatures matched them, feeding on the poison of the land. Every strike against them only seemed to make them stronger. "We can't win like this," Ethan shouted over the wind. "They'll keep coming." Liara's eyes flashed. "Then what do we do, human?" Ethan's mind raced. His eyes fixed on the fissure below, glowing with a sickly red light. He clenched his fists. "They're not endless," he said. "They're coming from the same source. If we seal the crack, we can stop them." Liara roared in answer, diving toward the ground. She blasted fire at the fissure, but the flames only slowed the creatures. The earth groaned, splitting wider. Ethan thought quickly. His eyes fell on the tools strapped to his belt. He had nothing powerful enough to stop the prison from breaking, but he could slow it, maybe long enough for the dragons to push back. "Get me close!" he shouted. Liara swooped low, her wings beating hard. Ethan leapt from her back, landing hard on the rocks near the fissure. Heat burned his skin. Shadows lunged at him, but Liara swept them aside with a sweep of her claws. Ethan dropped to his knees, pulling out his scanner and cutter. He slammed the devices into the ground, forcing them into the cracks. Sparks shot upward. The machines whined, their lights flashing red. "Come on!" he growled through clenched teeth. "Hold! Just hold!" The fissure screamed, the sound like 1,000 voices crying at once. The creatures staggered, their forms flickering. The ground rumbled beneath him, but the cracks slowed, the red glow dimming. The herd surged forward, striking together. Fire filled the valley, and this time, the creatures began to fall. Ethan collapsed to the ground, his hands trembling. His tools sparked and burned, the smell of metal sharp in the air. He had no strength left, but he looked up and saw the dragons driving the enemy back. The elder lifted his head high and roared. The herd answered as one, their voices shaking the night sky. The battle was not won, but it was not lost. For the first time, the herd had fought with a human at their side. And together, they had survived the enemy below. The valley was quiet again, but it was not peace. Smoke rose from the scorched ground. Ash floated through the air like snow. The bodies of the shadow creatures lay scattered, fading into nothing as if they had never been real. The herd stood in silence, their wings drooping with exhaustion, their scales scarred and burned. Ethan knelt on the rocks, his chest heaving with every breath. His tools were broken, their wires melted, their lights dead. His hands shook from strain, but he had no strength left to care. He had forced the fissure closed, if only for a time. Liara stepped beside him. Her silver scales glimmered faintly, though her sides still bled where the drone's blade had cut her earlier. She lowered her head, her breath hot against his shoulder. Ethan reached out and touched her scales gently, his hand steady even though his body trembled. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice low like a whisper of thunder. Ethan shook his head, his lips twisting into a faint smile. "No. You saved me. Again." Their eyes met. Golden against human blue. In that moment, no words were needed. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in fire and battle. The elder dragon approached, his massive frame casting a long shadow over them both. He studied Ethan for a long time, his ancient eyes full of thought. At last, he lowered his great head in a slow bow. "You are not prey," the elder said. "You are not outsider. You are herd." The words carried across the valley, echoing against the cliffs. The dragons stirred, their eyes fixed on Ethan. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others let out low, rumbling sounds of agreement. For the first time, Ethan felt the full weight of their trust. But inside, his heart was torn. He knew the prison beneath them was weakening. The shadow creatures were only a warning. Something worse was still locked below. As the herd settled, Ethan sat beside Liara, his hand resting against her warm scales. The firelight of the dragons lit the night sky, glowing against the smoke. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered, his voice so quiet that only she could hear. "I'm not strong enough." Liara's head lowered until her golden eyes were level with his. "Strength is not only in fire or claw. It is in the heart that stands even when it fears. You stood with us when you could have run. That is strength." Ethan swallowed hard. Her words sank deep into him, burning like a hidden flame. For so long he had believed he was only one man, small and forgotten. But here, in this valley of dragons, he was something more. The night passed slowly. The herd rested, their wings folded around their young. The air was heavy with smoke, but also with a new sense of hope. When dawn broke, the first light touched the broken valley. Ethan rose to his feet, his body stiff but his spirit unbroken. Liara stretched her wings beside him, her scales glowing silver in the sun. The elder dragon lifted his head, his voice carrying across the valley. "The prison weakens. The shadows will return. Soon the true enemy may rise. But we will not face it alone. Humanity has answered our call." The herd roared in one voice, a sound that shook the mountains. Ethan stood in the middle of them, small but unyielding. The fire in his chest burned brighter than his fear. He looked at Liara, and she looked back with a warmth that words could not name. There was trust. There was respect. And there was something more, a bond deeper than either had expected. Together, they had survived the night. Together, they would face whatever came next. And as the valley echoed with the cries of dragons, Ethan felt it in his heart. He was no longer alone. He was part of something greater. A bond forged not by blood, but by fire. The sun climbed higher, spilling light over the wounded valley. For a brief moment, the land looked alive again. The smoke cleared, the mountains glowed, and the herd stood together in silence. Yet Ethan felt no peace. Beneath the ground, he could still hear the hum. The prison was not broken yet, but it was breaking. The elder dragon stepped closer, his voice deep and grave. "The shadow creatures were only the beginning. The true enemy waits. If the prison falls, we will all burn." Ethan clenched his fists. He looked down at his broken tools, the wires melted, the devices ruined. He had nothing left that could fight against machines this old, this powerful. For a moment, despair tried to crush him. Then Liara's voice cut through his fear. "You are human. You see paths we cannot. You make fire from nothing. If there is a way, you will find it." Her golden eyes burned into him, steady and sure. He drew in a deep breath. She was right. He was not strong like them, but he had something else. A human mind, a human will, and a heart that refused to give up. He turned to the herd. "I can't destroy the prison. But maybe I can change it. These machines still answer to me. If I merge my tools with them, I can rewrite their command. I can keep the prison sealed, but also clear the poison from the valley." The dragon stirred uneasily. The elder's eyes narrowed. "If you fail?" Ethan looked at the ground, then lifted his head again with steady resolve. "If I fail, the enemy rises. But if I do nothing, the enemy rises anyway. At least this way, we have a chance." The herd rumbled, torn between fear and hope. At last, the elder gave a slow nod. "Then go, human. We will stand guard." Liara lowered her body. Ethan climbed onto her back. Her wings spread wide, catching the wind. Together, they soared toward the cliffs once more, the herd following like a storm at their heels. The chamber welcomed him with a roar of power. The machine's pulse brighter, the core beating like a furious heart. The hum filled his chest, threatening to tear him apart. Drones stirred in the shadows, their red eyes flashing awake. "Keep them back!" Ethan shouted. Liara roared, her wings crashing against the air. The herd filled the tunnels, fire pouring from their jaws, claws tearing into metal. The battle shook the earth, but Ethan pushed forward. He reached the core. Its light stretched toward him, fierce and wild. He dropped to his knees and ripped open his broken devices. Sparks burned his hands, but he kept working. He fused wires, forced circuits together, and pressed them against the glowing surface. "Human detected," the machine's cold voice said again. "Command required." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Command merge. Protect. Seal. Heal." The chamber shook. The symbols blazed across the walls, rewriting themselves in streams of fire. The core screamed, its light surging higher. Ethan's body felt like it was tearing apart, but he held on. His voice rose above the roar. "By my hands. By my will. This prison stays sealed. This valley lives." The core exploded with light. The ground shook like thunder. The fissures sealed shut, the poison burned away, and the shadows screamed before vanishing into smoke. The drones fell silent, their red eyes dimming to black. Ethan collapsed against the floor, his body weak, his chest burning with every breath. For a moment he thought he would die there. Then he felt warmth cover him. Liara's wing folded over his body, shielding him from the falling dust. Her breath rumbled close, steady and strong. "You did it," she whispered. Slowly Ethan lifted his head. The valley above was alive. The rivers glowed bright again. The trees shimmered with new leaves. Hatchlings leapt in joy, their scales shining with fresh fire. The herd roared in triumph, their voices shaking the heavens. The elder lowered his head before Ethan. His ancient voice trembled with respect. "From this day, you are no longer only human. You are kin. You are one of us." The herd bowed as one, their massive wings folding in honor. Ethan stood among them, his body weak but his heart burning brighter than ever. Liara stepped close, her golden eyes soft and fierce. "You came when we called. You gave us more than hope. You gave us life. You are part of our fire now." Ethan placed his hand against her scales. "And you are part of mine." The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the valley in light. Dragons soared into the sky, their wings blazing like banners of flame. Ethan watched them rise, his heart swelling with pride. The herd had asked a human for help. They never imagined that humanity's answer would save them all.